Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unlocking what is basically the hidden superpower of the business world. We so often focus on what companies sell, but their true strength actually lies in a massive, complex architecture functioning entirely behind the scenes: procurement and supply chains. If you want to understand how a business actually survives and thrives, you absolutely have to understand how it buys.
All right, let's dive right into this. We're going to cover a lot of ground today, starting with the heart of procurement, the categories of corporate spend, the rules of buying, what's actually beyond the price tag, complex supply chain networks, and finally, managing the people and systems.
Okay, part one, the heart of procurement, or the core of buying.
You know, it's so easy to just assume that businesses simply make things, right? But check this out. Roughly 60% of a typical organization's spend goes directly to raw materials. Just think about that scale for a second. Before a single product ever rolls off an assembly line, a company has to gather a mountain of physical building blocks. Well over half of the money going out the door is dedicated just to getting those materials in the first place.
Because the scale is so massive, we really need to clear up a crucial distinction right off the bat. Procurement is the actual action of acquiring those goods for the buying organization. Supply, on the flip side, is the movement of those materials and goods through channels to get to the end user. Basically, you procure to own and you supply to move. Make sense?
Moving on to part two, categories of spend. Let's look at corporate expenditure.
When a company opens its wallet, not all spending is created equal. It's got to be highly categorized. The biggest divide here is between direct and indirect spend. Imagine a smartphone manufacturer. Direct procurements are the microchips, the glass screens, the processors, stuff that's literally built into the product. Without them, there is no phone. Indirect procurements, though, that's everything else keeping the lights on. Wages for support staff, the office rent, your internal software subscriptions. Indirect spend keeps the business breathing, but it's usually decentralized and handled case by case.
Next up, we have to look at how long a purchase actually provides value. Capital expenditures, or CapEx, are those big strategic investments in long-term assets. We're talking heavy machinery, a new warehouse, land, things that depreciate over time but keep bringing value way beyond the current year. On the other hand, you've got operational expenditures, or OpEx. This is your day-to-day grind, paying the rent, buying raw materials, covering salaries. These are ongoing bills you're usually paying every single month or year.
We also have to separate the things you can actually touch from the things you can't. Stock procurements are tangible goods you can literally put on a shelf and list in inventory. Things like cotton, coal, or just plain old nuts and bolts. You can ship them, you can store them based on what you think you'll need. Non-stock procurements, however, are totally intangible. These are often one-off purchases or services, like hiring a cleaning crew or running an ad campaign. You obviously can't store a service in a warehouse, but let me tell you, making sure you get value for your money here is absolutely critical.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how buyers map out their suppliers based on risk and cost. They use something called the Kraljic matrix. If a supplier is high cost and high risk, that's strategic. You need a rock-solid relationship with them. Low cost, low risk, that's just a routine purchase. But look at that bottleneck quadrant. This one is sneaky. It's low cost but highly risky. This is usually your monopoly supplier. They don't charge you a fortune, but if they suddenly fail, your entire production line literally grinds to a halt because there's nowhere else to go.
All right, part three, the rules of buying. Let's talk strategic guidelines. So how in the world does a buyer actually evaluate a purchase? Well, they use a checklist called the 5 rights of procurement. Every single purchase has to hit the right price, right quantity, right quality, right time, and right place. And here's the catch. They act like rubber bands, constantly pulling against each other. For example, if you want a better price, you might buy a huge quantity to get an economy of scale. Buying in bulk is cheaper, right? But boom, now you've just skyrocketed your inventory storage costs. It is a constant balancing act.
And that brings us to an incredibly elegant problem in the world of procurement. When you set out to buy something, do you want to buy the exact recipe, or do you just want to buy the result?
This is the classic showdown between conformance and performance specifications. A conformance spec is a super strict technical blueprint. If you order a highly specific make and model of a toner cartridge, that's conformance. But if that cartridge jams up your workflow, well, the risk is entirely on you as the buyer. A performance spec, though, focuses completely on the outcome. You hire a company and just say, hey, keep my printers paper jam free and running. You do not tell them how to do it. This shifts all the risk onto the supplier and really sparks innovation because they're highly motivated to figure out the most efficient way to get you that result.
Moving into part 4, beyond the price tag,
Let's look at total value.
Modern procurement is definitely not just about hunting for the cheapest sticker price. We've got to weigh the total cost of acquisition against the total cost of ownership, or TCA versus TCO. TCA is just the purchase price plus transport and insurance, basically what it costs to get the thing to your front door. But TCO, that analyzes the entire life cycle. We're talking maintenance, energy use, employee training, and eventually disposal. This actually became a massive issue in the 1980s when managers suddenly realized that supporting software and hardware could actually cost 5 to 8 times the initial purchase price.
Ultimately, the whole game is about adding value. Think of a celebrity chef. They take very basic, raw ingredients and, through their unique production process, transform them into a luxury, high-priced meal. The value added is quite literally the difference between the cost of those raw carrots and onions and the final premium price a customer is perfectly willing to pay for the experience.
But today, value creation is deeply tied to sustainability and getting true value for money. It is not just about raw corporate profit anymore. Organizations are increasingly mapping their procurement straight to the UN Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. They're realizing that things like responsible consumption, climate action, and protecting natural resources aren't just PR. They are absolutely critical metrics of overall public value.
Okay, Part 5, Complex Supply Chain Networks. Welcome to the global web.
When we zoom way out to the macro level, we see this massive, intricate, global web of commerce. Back in the day, a business relationship was just dyadic, point A to point B. But today, it's a sprawling, inter-business supply chain. Think about it. An extractor at a rock quarry supplies a stone cutter, who supplies a tile manufacturer, who supplies a big box retailer, who finally sells it to a customer. Upstream toward the earth, downstream toward your living room. It's a deeply linked sequence of dependencies, and if one link breaks, everyone feels it.
So to manage all this without plunging into total chaos, organizations rely on some pretty sophisticated software. An MRP, or Material Requirements Planning System, is laser-focused on assembly. It takes your exact bill of materials and your master production schedule to calculate precisely what parts are needed and exactly when to order them. And this usually feeds straight into an ERP, an Enterprise Resource Planning System. The ERP acts as the ultimate single source of truth, tying together accounting, procurement, and project management across the entire company.
And finally, Part 6, Managing People and Systems, the human element.
We've talked about the raw materials, the software systems, and the costs, but none of this hidden architecture survives without the human element. Every single procurement decision impacts stakeholders, and organizations have to juggle some fiercely competing demands. Inside the building, internal stakeholders, like your employees and directors, they want high wages and maximum profit. But outside the building, external stakeholders, like customers, the government, and the local community, want high-quality goods, strict regulatory compliance, rock-bottom prices, and totally green environmental sustainability. Talk about a tough crowd to please.
To figure out how to handle these relationships, businesses use something called the Mendeley matrix. It basically maps stakeholders by two things: their power and their interest. Now, someone with high interest and high power, that's a key player, and you absolutely must actively engage with them. But here's the tricky part. Look at the high-power, low-interest quadrant. You have to keep this group satisfied. Because if they get annoyed, they can very easily wake up, shift over into the high-interest category, and use their massive power to bring your entire strategy to a screeching halt.
So we've come full circle. We've journeyed all the way from the raw cost of a tiny microchip to the vast, complex networks that literally dictate global trade. Which leaves us with this final, rather provocative thought. If 60% of an organization's resources relies entirely on what it buys, are they just doing some routine purchasing, or are they quite literally architecting their own survival? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.